Welcome back to Made by J&D. These are the things I've got to mount next into the fire truck. Power brakes with the booster. That's the brake pedal that came out of the motorhome. It's kind of mounted like this. There's no room for that in the fire truck, so I'm going to have to mount it sideways. And I'll probably come up with some sort of bail or bell crank. I'll have to take this motion, somehow turn it into that motion. Promises to be exciting. Where is this brake pedal in relation to the steering column? And you know, when I mount this to the dash, I don't need all of this. So I've taken things apart. One thing I found is that bracket, this went onto the pivot, and that lined it up perfectly to go into the input rod there, the push rod into the vacuum thing here. This is just a big aluminum bar. It's been threaded on both ends to accept these bolts, and that held the brackets. So I have my mount. As far as that goes, I have the mount. I can make it any distance apart. All it had in here are these plastic bearings. Inside of the tube here, outside of the bar there, just pivoted in that just fine. Okay, easy. This now is going to be going underneath in the front of the cab, underneath the floorboards, sideways. Let's see if I can draw what's in my mind. The fire truck cab, it's got the dash, comes straight down, and the floorboards, and it goes back. The steering column is roughly kind of like this. It's not to scale, obviously. I did some measurements. If you look on, a lot of TikTok or wherever, you'll see cars driving through the storefronts and whatever. A lot of that, I think they've shown, is because there's not enough distance between the brake pedal and the gas pedal, or they're in a bad space, or the feet gets caught or whatever. Anyways, there's a gap. I measured on our car, and it is about 3.5 inches between the side of the gas pedal and the side of the brake pedal close to it. The brake pedal is about 1.5 inches the center of it is about like here, from the center of the steering column. And then the gas pedal is about 3.5 inches further away. To the gas pedal. So that's what I'm going to strive for here. Underneath all of that, you have the frame, and that's tied into the steering box, which is about in this area. Goes to the link we just made, straight up to the steering column. That's my room. This is straight down under the frame, so that's not a problem. I can come to the right side of that. Now, I'm going to put a brake pedal in here. Here's the pivot point. The brake pedal comes something like this, and then there will be a lever. It has to push down. Now, the brake pedal and all of that will be set somewhere in the neighborhood of here. Brackets. I'll press down on the pedal in this area, and that presses downward. Now that downward, with my experience now with the bell crank that handles the steering, I can make another bell crank. And that bell crank, I know the length of these levers because I have that lever here. I know the length of this lever. and that will press then straight into the brake booster. That'll have, so where do I mount that? Well, I can't mount it to the body. Well, sorry, I can't mount it to the frame because the frame and the body are independent. And I don't want any vibrations or movement or anything transmitted from the braking system into the brake pedal. It just wouldn't work right. So that's, if you look anywhere on any car, the master cylinder and all that's mounted to the body, to the firewall. So I'm going to do that here. I'll mount it to the body here somewhere. I was kind of thinking maybe I could put the, I'm not going to draw it here, but if I put this brake booster facing backwards, I've measured it. There's enough room for that big brake booster to fit between the floorboards and the bottom of the body here. But the problem comes in, I have to have room for the bell crank, and there's another frame member about here. And that's not enough room for for me to mount this to the body in front of this frame member. So it's got to be sideways. And let's see if I can make that work. You know, I might have to mount that brake pedal first in order to find out where this goes, because I don't know where it's going to wind up in relationship to this. I think I've come up with a plan. I've got this shift linkage in low. Somewhere in here is drive, reverse, and then up there in park. I'm going to leave it down here in low because that's where it's going to interfere with the brake the most. This pedal sits about this far out. This bar, I mean, sits about this far out. This is the bracket that holds, that used to hold the right-hand side of it. And that's lining up here with a couple of little holes. And you can kind of see what I'm thinking about. I think I can use this to replace this bracket. As it is, this is too long. And that's in the right position front to back, but it's too low. It's going to hit the floor. Anyway, that's how I'm thinking. This pedal here is about the right height above the floor when it's fully depressed. And when it's not depressed, it's about in this neighborhood, I guess. Man, I don't know. Anyways, it gives me enough swing. Remove this bracket and do what I need to do to make it match this. Now that I'm not using this piece on the dash, because this used to be here already, and that can become my new hinge point for the new bell crank that I make based on this. I'll have to have another one here, or something incorporated with the dash up in here, or with the front side of the cab. Yeah, that's a plan. I'm over here by the drill press, and I've got the brake components arrayed out in front of me. That bracket there fits onto this end of the brake booster. This piece here, and this used to be one piece, about in this configuration, but I've cut that off because I can reuse that, and I'll make a bracket that comes, well, out this way, that presses down, and it will press directly onto there. Everything's lined up, just good. I'll make another bracket there, which will probably be combined with something that holds it onto the body. It raised a problem. These two plastic bushings, I think I found some online. It's kind of like the GMC Motorhome is the stepchild or the weird uncle that nobody wanted to acknowledge. You try to find parts for it, and unless you go to a specialist motorhome site, nobody will list the GMC motorhome ever existed. They'll list every kind of truck and pickup under the sun, but not the motorhome. So trying to find these was a bit of a challenge, and luckily they are in common with a lot of other vehicles. They used them all the way up into the 90s, I think, or maybe they're still using them for all I know. But trying to find the right part number and making sure that this was the right size. You know, I found a couple that looked like this for a 5/8 inch bar, but you know, this is a 1 inch. Anyways, I think I've found some. And I can use that. I'll cut this bar to suit this length here. I'll continue to use this brake, the rest of this, inside the cab. I'll just cut this to length. I've already modified the bracket that was underneath the dash of the fire truck. I've modified that to suit there. That is, it'll simulate this part. But the problem I ran into, inside there, you should be able to see that it's been bored out. That's the original thickness. And that is roughly, I'm thinking, 1/8 of an inch, just under. Smaller ID than this end. And this end, this little bushing fits. This end, it doesn't. And even if I forced it in there, I couldn't never get that bar in there. There's the options of taking it to a machine shop and getting them to bore these out. They have the tools, the equipment. Probably wouldn't take much time. Cost a few bucks though. And you know me, I'm going to try to, I'm going to be cheap and try to do it where I can. Well, this is a 1-inch diameter hole saw. And I've done this before on this project, not with this hole saw, but with another one. I can use this as a mill. If I smooth these teeth off on the outside, because that wouldn't fit. That wouldn't fit inside this original bore, because the teeth are, you know, they're splayed out. But when I sanded the outside edge of those teeth off, it became exactly 1 inch, or close enough. And then I had to taper or countersink one end of this, the original end. I had to countersink that and hold it and go very carefully into here. If you don't have a pilot hole, there's a pilot drill here, to make a pilot hole. It holds the hole saw from just going all over the place. Big risk with that, so I had to be very careful. But all I did was I put it there, I carefully worked it down, and I was able to get it all the way down. So then, this is the end I cut. That's the end I milled out. It fits fine. That fits. All is well. I'm quite pleased with myself. You can see that this is a pretty sketchy thing. This has a lot of torque. This has a lot of teeth. And this is not very stable. I've done my little kind of a taper at the bore there, and I've got to hold this, touchy-feely here, so it's just lined up. Now, you have to use a lot of oil, because this is slick all the way down, and it rubs inside the bore you're making, and it gets hot in a hurry, so you have to do it in little bits, or this will get too hot and it'll melt or something. So, anyways, see if I can repeat the first one. It's noisy, so I'm going to get some hearing protection. But once you get it that far, it's only a 1/16 of an inch, or a 32nd even, it's enough. This doesn't want to wander anymore, and it doesn't want to grab and shoot it all over the place. But it's still going to take a lot of oil. Anyways, you get the idea. It's come time to cut this bar. I've just set this on a nice flat counter, and I've drawn that line. So right now, if I cut that on the line, I should have about a 1/16 of an inch. And that ought to be enough to just limit play side to side on this, but give it enough room where it clears and it won't bind up between the brackets. Guess I might as well mark it now. But I'll drill these holes, and I thought this was bigger than what it is. It's actually a 1/2 inch, 16, I think. And that's the biggest tap that I've got, luckily. And the size drill for that is a 17/64, which is the right size drill to drill before I tap it. The only other thing I got to make do is I go down the center, or as close as I can with the limited tools that I've got. Damn. Yeah, they're going to take some time. For whatever reason, it appears that my little microphone system here has gone bad. This is the receiver, plugs onto the camera. And this is the one that I wear. But batteries are flat. And I just charged this yesterday. So the batteries apparently have gone bad on this. Guess I'll need to get another one. Anyways, I'm using the microphone that I got with the camera, which is a Rode, and it's kind of remote, so the sound quality isn't so good. But today is sort of like, otherwise, it's sort of like Christmas. I've just got a bunch of stuff in that I've been ordering and waiting on. And the steering is in place, although I don't like the knuckle that I've modified there, the link. I messed it up, I think. It fits and it works, but the coating, I can't duplicate that really thick coating that was on the splines before. And it would probably work the way it is. It's just got a lot of slop. I've gone ahead and, well, I'll show you. So you go onto some Facebook pages, and there are pretty much pages for anything you want to collect or rebuild or whatever. And I was asking about what kind of coatings that people have had on these and how to rejuvenate them. And this fella came back with this one, which is one that he had pulled off and replaced with another thing. Anyway, this is a completely new, complete link. And I'm thinking I'll just try to see if I can use this the way it is on the truck. The link that's there, this one's kind of had more damage than mine. It's got some scoring on it. But the boot here is new. Looks like a brand new boot. And I'll take apart the bearing in here and see how that looks, but it looks pretty good overall. So for 50 bucks, you can't beat that. This is a 1/2" 13 thread. I had to duplicate that on this end, and I haven't drilled that hole yet, but I'm going to do it on that end. Well, when I tried to do it with my old tap set, which was a Buffalo that I bought back in the 70s, I'd never used that 1/2" 13 tap before. I'd used the taps a lot, and they've served their purpose. I think they paid for themselves. I think I'd have paid 20 bucks for it or something. Anyways, that 1/2" 13 I'd never used because I never really had anything that big, and here it is. But I tried to use it the first time, and it couldn't cut threads in this at all. I'm using the correct drill bit, which is a 27/64, and there's just no way I could thread it. It actually broke my T-handle here. It cracked a little right here. It just cracked it. So those are garbage. Well, there's a fellow on YouTube. His YouTube site's called Project Farm. And pretty entertaining, I think. His voice is kind of annoying, but he does good tests. I like the way his setup is. And he claims he doesn't take sponsorship at all. He buys all that stuff with his own money, and then he goes ahead and buys something and tests it based on people's requests. That looks very similar to this one. I reckon that's the same thing. Whatever. Anyway, based on his recommendation, he tried probably a dozen different tap sets, and he goes into great detail about how well they cut and how much effort it took to cut and what kind of wear there was afterwards. Anyways, this was the one he recommended the highest of the three. This is, the one that for me was the best affordability and best quality. They cut the easiest. It's an Irwin Hansen. So I'm going to try that today and see if it cuts any better than this old beat up one here that I'm just going to throw out. Like I said, I'm working on brakes. I'm thinking, how's the best way to do the brakes? And I'll show you in the cab later on. But I was going to use a pushing motion. Push on the pedal, and it made it easier for a lever to then push down on a rod, and that would push onto another lever, bell crank, that pushed into the brake booster underneath the floorboards. Well, this would have to be pretty big because that's a lot of force that you're putting on those pedals, and I didn't want this to bend. I didn't want to use a huge rod. And I figured maybe it'd be better just to pull. And I'll show you what I've done in there, but I've moved the pedal outboard. I'd made brackets, and I went ahead and changed them to move it outboard 1 3/4 inches. That allowed the bell crank on the pedal to be inside the cab to pull up on this. And this is just a 3/8 inch 24, I think, rod, all thread. And that will pull up on the bell crank and cause the, and then make the booster work. So that's the plan. So I bought these things where these are little heam joints. This should fit. And I can make this pretty so the all thread isn't showing. And I'll cut this to suit. That's why I bought it all thread. That's 2 feet long. But I'll cut it to suit, and if I need to make it look pretty, there's some jam nuts and everything. I'll just cover this with something. Make a nice smooth rod that looks good, and then I can have a circular penetration in the floorboard that just keeps the dust and noise out as best as I can. That's the plan there. And finally, these are new old stock, genuine GM parts. On the went on and got these through eBay. And here's the rod. Perfect. I've got 4 of them so that I have enough for both rods on both ends of this pedal mechanism. So now I'm just going to try to thread this again and see how well these new taps work. 1/2 inch 13. See how we go. I'm going to use my big one here. Bigger is better, right? If enough is enough and more is better, then too much is just right. Oh, look at that. That is beautiful. I could have done that with one of these small ones. So this piece of junk, well, it doesn't matter. As I said before, I bought that more than 50 years ago. First time I tried to use it, it didn't work. Most of the other taps worked just fine. But, yeah, that day is done. I'm going to throw that one away right now. Let's see how we did. There's my pedal. Like I say, this is the wrong angle. Probably all I'll have to do is straighten this out a bit. Hope that doesn't interfere. Next thing, I've got to make a lever like this one and put it on the back here. This is the brake booster out of the motorhome. And this would have been working like this. There's one of the brackets. Would have had a pin here. That's the pin. And it acted directly. You press on the pedal down this way and that would push in. I can't do that now because I need to pull up on this to make that push in. So I'm going to have to do something like this. Reverse all the brackets. That'll be like this now. Luckily, this is symmetrical, and I can just flip it upside down and everything still lines up. But what I do have to make, 2 pair of these bell cranks. This one will be here, and that's what it's made for. The other one has the heam joint. All the torque on this is going to be up. When I push on the pedal, I'm pulling up on this. That'll pull up on this, and that's going to go up into the dash, so or up into the front of the truck. So that's got to be pretty strong because there's going to be a lot of force. Yeah, I think the front of the cab is strong enough. I can make a strong enough bracket and bolt it in enough places that it should be strong enough. So now what I really need to do is make a pair of these, 2 pair of these bales, or these bell cranks. One will go here to pull up, and the other one will be on the other rod that is pulling when I press on the brakes. This is a cutout piece of cardboard. It sort of, copies this lever. That's off the original brake lever off the motorhome. And that's the shape of it. I don't need this little offset, upset. This is just going to be straight pieces made of roughly the same thickness material. And I made this out of cardboard using a variety of little sheets. That's off the steering column. This is another piece of this. That's the inside bit. I use this here for the 3/4 inch hole that does the end of that. And then the space between this was, I think, 3 inches. Just a little over. Now I need 4 of them. And this is some scrap iron that I had from when the building was built that I'm in here. You save these little bits and you can make things out of them. Don't know if you can see it, but I've already drawn the outline of my pattern. And this will be the 4th one. And yeah, I'm just going to cut these freehand. And go from there. There's my pattern. I've cleaned these all up. They fit the pattern. They're all pretty uniform, all 4 of them. Now I need to drill these holes. The hole here, 3/8. This hole here, which is 1.25 inches, I think. That's the hole saw for it. Anyways, I'll drill the hole here on the tip first. I'll use a 3/8 inch bolt. Bolt through here, that'll hold that in alignment. And I'll use a pilot drill, not this one, but I'll use a pilot drill all the way through these, all 4 of them together at once. Then I can use this and I'll know that they'll all be the same length. I had to clean up around this a little bit because there were welds on this that were really pretty kind of sloppy. But I think I have it just about right. That just fits in there. A little bit of play. We're good. The only other thing I've got to check is that this is 90 degrees to this. And this should be pushing, and I think that's the way it goes on my master cylinder. This surface here used to push on some switches that were here. Well, the switches came in this way, and this was behind that. Well, that wouldn't work because look where the pedal lines up. So I've got to cut this plate off and reposition it here. Based on what I did do, I put these other 2 bell cranks onto this rod here. And I've cut that other piece off so that I'll put it up back on later when I know where it goes. Again, knowing that the master cylinder here has 1.25 inches of travel, it's about from there to there. I was just going to measure that actually. This arm will have to be reconfigured because it's bent too much of an angle. It'll have to come more straight down. But if I measure that that's at 1.25 inches. It's actually pretty good. Here's my 1.25 inches. That ought to be good. I have full travel anyways. And I need to hold this master cylinder up off the floor somehow. I just got some buckets laying down underneath here. And this 2-foot rod, just to see where that winds up. If not, I'll know how much to cut off. It's about 4 inches. Let me get a 4-inch spacer under there, and I'll cut 4 inches off of this rod. And that's how it winds up. I've got, the rod is perpendicular, more or less. Perpendicular this way, it's perpendicular in this plane. I have room below the floorboards, about like that, for this master cylinder booster to fit below it. I still have to come up the other side of the bracket on this bell crank. And that's going to clear the this flange just fine. If I need to, I can come out a little bit. From this, I can figure out where to put the bracket that comes down from behind the cab here and come straight down onto these posts, which support this vertically, and then I have to come in from this direction from here over to make part of the other side of this bracket and hold it this direction. So I've made this piece, the other side of this, to hold this bell crank onto the booster. This is just out of a piece of frame that came out of the motorhome. I've been trying so hard to reuse stuff as it came out from something. I don't have to modify it at all, but you know, trying to save time. And I've got to really change my way of thinking. It's not like I'm having to buy anything. It's just I'm trying to save myself time and effort. Trying to reuse this piece as it is on this side. I was going to have another piece of angle iron bolt on here. I was going to weld it onto, not this piece, but a longer piece of this 3/4 inch. Looks like, you know, it's pretty heavy gauge square tubing. And that was going to be bolted up on the inside of the firewall there. It's not really time savings. I have more of this frame. What I have to do is, it's going to be this way. And it's only going to have a bolt hole here. And it's going to come up a little ways. I'll have 2 of these pieces about here. But that's going to be so much easier than just trying to reuse this original bracket. So I'll just take it over to the frame, draw up in my mind's eye what it's got to look like. It's basically just going to be the whole piece of frame about this long. And I'll shape it a little bit down at the bottom. It's going to taper out. But yeah, you'll see here. That's all looking pretty good. This is further out this way than it will be, because this will, there's some 3/4 inch tubing that goes between this side I'm looking at, and that will wind up behind, and that spaces this out correctly so that this bar rod is vertical. And while I'm just looking at this here, this is, you know, it's a good piece, it's good and sturdy, but it just looks untidy. I'm trying to reutilize these 2 switch position holder things. I'm having to modify so much in here, and it just looks untidy to have this piece coming down like that. The whole thing can be clean if I just run this straight up. I have a lot of room up here. So I think that's what I'll do. And yeah, good, we'll do that. This is coming together all right. That's the bracket I'd made for the right-hand side of the booster. And that bolts on fine. I've just cut this off. It was a little bit, I made it a little bit tall so I could adjust it to be the right length later. So these 4 bolts are all tight. This rod is straight up and down. It's more or less parallel with the wall here. All right, that's bolted on. The other bracket, I used this template, and copied with holes I drilled, and I have some nuts welded onto the back of the bracketry. So I had to transfer those holes onto here, and I just used a piece of cardboard, marked out where the holes were, and laid it in there. Yeah, it wasn't perfect. I had to move the holes a little bit, but it's good enough. And that means it's good like this, and it's good, you know, back and forth, but as far as twisting, well, this rod here will take care of it. It's still a little bit of movement because I don't have this welded in yet. But it's bolted here to this bracket on the front of the booster. I'll do some tack welding just like these here. And this being so wide, I can have one floorboard that goes from here over and another a seam, and then another one goes that way. These are pretty light duty. They don't have a lot of strength. They don't add a lot to this big mount here for the cab, which is just amazing to me. Everything else is built so strong on this cab, but this is just not much. Everything that's holding up the front of this cab, anything that ever held up the front of this cab was this piece. And it's just light gauge metal everywhere. Anyways, that's what they've got. They've got these pieces that more or less just supported the floorboards, and I'm adding a third. I've tested the pedal out several times. Still got liquid in the master cylinder, but that's good. Lots of pressure. That works. That's good. Yeah, clean up that oil now. So that's good. Everything's in the right place. The next thing I have to worry about is the gas pedal. That fits behind there. A little, just about perfect. Thing is, the existing one from the motorhome is just weird shaped, and this is meant to pull on a cable that work the throttle. It kind of interferes. Right now it's in the wrong shape. I don't know where to put it yet. It might be that I have to put it somewhere else because this bar is going to interfere with that. I don't know what I'll do. Anyway, that's for the next episode. Thanks for sticking with me so far. Please subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. I'll see you next time.